Chapter 1. The end came quietly. The world didn't end in fire, nor in screams. There was no great war, no meteor crashing through the sky, no judgment day, no machines rising from the ashes of man's ambition. It ended in silence. A silence so deep, so absolute. Even the wind seemed too afraid to whisper. Hope was the last to die, not with a cry, but with a long, quiet breath. The land grew dry. The rivers ran bitter. The sky forgot how to let the sun in. City lights flickered. Then died one by one, until the nights became darker than fear itself. Skyscrapers now slouch like the bones of ancient giants, hollow, broken. Dust clings to everything, streets buried under ash, cars frozen in rust. Time itself, abandoned. No birds, no dogs, not even the hum of insects. And yet, some still walk. Not heroes, not soldiers, just survivors. Drifting shadows with nowhere left to go. Wrapped in torn coats, gas masks hiding the last traces of who they used to be. They move through silence and memory. One of them walks now, step by step through the ruins. Each footfall a whisper in a dead world. A compass hangs around his neck, old, stubborn, still pointing north, as if that means anything anymore. He pauses beneath a broken bridge. Concrete crumbles, rebar juts out like bones. There in the dust, he lights a candle. The flame flickers, but it holds. A small defiance against the gray. He stares at it, searching, a memory maybe, a promise, or just proof that something can still burn. Above him, the sky hangs heavy and gray. No day, no night, only twilight. Forever. He walks on, past mannequins, frozen in shattered windows, past rusted signs and forgotten dreams. In his pocket, scraps of old paper, torn maps, faded pages, a photograph, a woman, a child, their faces worn away by time. But he remembers the shape of her smile, the way the child held her coat. They were his light. Once. Now they are memory, and memory is all he has left. He leaves a candle behind just like the others, not to be found, not to be followed, but to say, I was here. He reaches what used to be a library. The roof is gone, but some books survive. He picks one up, brushes away the ash. The title is gone, but the words, they still whisper. He keeps it. Some things still matter. As night falls, or what passes for night, he shelters in a crumbling building, lights another candle. The flame dances on old maps.
Come on, you can do it.
On an old photo. On a face he'll never see again. Somewhere out there. Maybe. Someone else still remembers. Someone else still
Faint
dreams.
laughter.
Outside, the wind moans like a morning song. Inside, the candle burns. Faint, fragile, but alive. One more ember in a world of ashes. Chapter 2. When Eyes Met. Silence. In the silence of what remained, they met, not in a dramatic clash of fate, not in a moment scored by music or marked by thunder, just two figures crossing paths beneath the skeleton of a fallen world. He walked, from the north, she from the east, and between them only ash stirred. The boy wore a mask like most survivors, but his eyes, they betrayed him. Eyes that had watched too much fall apart. Eyes that had buried too many names in silence. They were the eyes of someone who no longer believed in beginnings, only in the act of continuing. She, on the other hand, carried no weapon in hand, just a small satchel and a scarf wrapped tight against the dust. Her coat was worn, patched, in places with thread and care, and her eyes, somehow impossibly, still held light. They stopped just a few feet apart. No words passed. There were no words left for strangers. Not here. Not now. Only glances. His hand hovered near his belt, not in threat, but in habit. She noticed, and did nothing. No fear, no flinch, only a faint, tired smile. A flicker of warmth in a world that had long forgotten what warmth felt like. Between them stood the remnants of an old marketplace. Broken stalls, collapsed awnings. A plastic doll lay face down in the dust, its painted smile half erased by time. Overhead, a tangle of wires hung uselessly from leaning poles, swaying in the wind like ghostly vines. He broke the silence first, not with words, but with a gesture. From his pack he pulled a tin can, sealed, dented but intact. Food. Rare. He rolled it toward her slowly. She hesitated, not out of mistrust, but surprise. Then reaching down, she accepted it, nodding once. Gratitude didn't need to be spoken. It just needed to be seen. In return, she stepped forward, extending something small wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside, half a bar of soap. It smelled faintly of lavender. A ghost of a world that once valued clean hands, hot baths, and soft skin. He looked up at her. She was already walking past him, quiet, steady. But just before, she disappeared behind the ruins of an old pharmacy. She looked back. Their eyes met again, not as strangers now, but as people who, for a moment, had shared something without taking, a rare thing. He didn't follow her, and she didn't stay. Some meetings in the wasteland weren't meant to bloom into stories. Sometimes they were just sparks, fleeting and quiet, but enough to keep the darkness at bay. He stood there for a long time after she vanished from sight, holding the soap, breathing in the faintest trace of lavender like it was the last thing left that proved beauty had ever existed. Then, gently, he placed the soap back into its cloth and stored it beside his photo and the compass. He didn't know her name, and he would probably never see her again. But in the dead silence of the world, she had reminded him of something he thought was gone. Kindness without cost, light that asked for nothing in return. A reason to take the next step. He continued walking, and as he left, he lit another candle. Not just for himself this time, but for her, wherever she was heading. Its flame danced low in the wind, but it stood, just like the two of them. Chapter 3. A shelter beneath.
Come on, you can do it.
Rust beneath the rusted skeleton of an old railway bridge, they found a place, a forgotten train car, its paint long stripped by time, its windows shattered, its silence deeper than the night. But in that silence, they built something, not a home. Not yet, but a shelter, a beginning. With scavenged blankets and warped wooden planks, they made walls out of will, a roof from resolve. And between the cracked metal ribs of that train, they lit a single oil lamp. Its flame was small, but steady. Like them, nights passed, cold, still, endless. But under that soft, flickering light they spoke. Not often, not quickly, but deeply. He told her about the orchard that once bloomed behind his childhood home, the tree he used to climb, the smell of rain on fresh earth, his brother's laugh. She told him about her father's violin, her mother's cooking, the song she could never finish writing, the dream she once had of flying. They didn't speak of survival. Not really. They spoke of what was lost and somehow what might still be found. Each story became a brick, each memory, a roof tile, each laugh, rare as it was, a window letting light back in. They didn't need to say it. But in the pauses between their words, in the way they handed each other water, in how they looked to the door before sleeping, there was trust. There was something. And though the wind outside howled through broken steel and bone, inside that shattered train car, the warmth never quite faded. Not hope, not yet, but the shape of it. Like the glow of a lamp in the dark. Not enough to light the way forward, but enough to say, you're not alone. Chapter 4. White Silence. Winter came like a memory that refused to fade. Cold, relentless, unforgiving. The wind screamed through broken windows, through steel bones of the dead bridge above, through the empty skeletons of buildings that once held life, and with it came the snow, not gentle, not pure, but sharp, ashen, endless. They huddled close, not just for warmth, but for survival, for presence, for something to hold on to. Her fingers, wrapped in threadbare gloves, clutched his sleeve as though letting go meant vanishing. He pulled her closer, not with urgency, but with the quiet certainty that they needed each other just to keep existing. Inside, the train car, breath turned to mist and silence was deeper than ever. But it was the right kind of silence. Not the silence of ruins, not the silence of loss. This was the silence of two hearts beating in the same rhythm, even in the stillness of frost. They shared more now. Not stories, but gestures. The way she tucked the blanket over his shoulder before lying down. The way he let her take the last sip of warm water. The way their hands found each other in the dark without needing to look. Outside, the world turned white. A white that was not clean, but dead. A cold that swallowed sound and memory and time. But inside that train car, a different kind of warmth stirred, not fire, not flame, but presence. Connection. A fragile, flickering life in a land gone still. They didn't say it out loud. They didn't need to. In the coldest night, they became each other's fire, each other's anchor, each other's reason to stay, alive just one more day. Even in the heart of winter, where everything else had withered, they endured, not as survivors, but as two souls who had found, against all odds, something stronger than the cold. Chapter 5. The Wound. The morning was like every other, gray, still, brittle with cold. He rose before the first wind stirred the ash. She was still asleep, curled beneath threadbare blankets, her breath rising in pale puffs in the frozen air of the train car. He watched her for a moment, as if memorizing the way her hair fell across her face,
Come on, you can
as if
do it.
unsure whether he'd see it again. Then he left, without a word. He always went alone. It was safer that way. Two targets doubled the risk.
Faint laughter.
One could hide, the other could return. That was the rule. Not spoken, but understood. The ruins beyond the bridge had been picked clean long ago, but sometimes the snow shifted, revealing forgotten things. A rusted can of beans, a cracked lighter, even an old medical kit with bandages stiff from time. Today, he ventured farther. He crossed into the red zone, a collapsed supermarket, its roof sunken in like a broken rib cage, shelves buried under snow and silence. He moved carefully, Each step slow, deliberate. The cold bit at his fingers through torn gloves. Then it happened. A groan of metal. A slip. A sudden, sharp pain. The rebar pierced just below his ribs, a jagged edge stained with the rust of years. It tore through coat and skin, deep and fast. He gasped. Not a scream, but a sound cut off at the throat. The snow turned red beneath him. He stumbled back, clutching his side, vision spinning, world narrowing to pain and breath and blood. Time lost meaning. He didn't remember falling. He didn't remember crawling out, but he remembered her. Her name. Her voice. Her warmth. He had to return. Hours passed. Maybe more. By the time she found him, he was no longer standing. He was leaning against a wall of broken concrete, his coat soaked through, his lips pale. She didn't shout. Didn't panic. She simply ran to him, arms around his shoulders, lifting him with a strength born not of muscle but desperation. He said her name once, barely a whisper. That was enough. She pulled him home. Through snowdrifts and skeletal streets, through wind that howled like morning, through the silence of a world that no longer watched. Her breath came in gasps. Her legs burned, but she didn't stop. Not until they reached the train car, their shelter, their fragile sanctuary. She laid him down on the floor, his head in her lap, his blood soaking into the rags beneath them. She lit the oil lamp, its glow small but defiant. In its light, his face looked different, younger, more human, more breakable. She tore strips from her own blanket, pressed them hard against the wound. Her hands trembled. Her mouth moved. Words without voice. A prayer to no God. A plea to the broken air. And still, he looked at her. Through the haze, through the pain, his eyes never left hers. In them, she saw something she hadn't seen in so long. Recognition. Not just of her face, but of what she meant. To him, to the moment. To whatever was left of the world he tried to speak. She shook her head. Don't, she said. Save your strength. But he smiled. A cracked, weary smile. And then he whispered, "Still here." She bit her lip until it bled. His blood was still warm. That meant there was still time. She cleaned the wound with water warmed by her own body, wrapped it tightly, held him close. Outside, snow fell again. Slow, heavy, relentless. Inside, the only sound was breath. They didn't sleep. Couldn't. She sat with her back against the wall, his head resting on her shoulder. She whispered stories, half-remembered, dreams. The name of her sister, the song her father used to hum. Anything to keep the silence at bay. And he listened, eyes half-lidded, still smiling. "You look like sunlight," he said once. She looked down. "In all this ash, you still shine." She laughed, not out of joy, but because if she didn't, she might break. "You're delirious," she said, but her voice trembled, because maybe he wasn't.
Come on, you can do it.
Maybe in the middle of all this ruin, all this cold, all this loss, they had found something worth saving. Not a future, not safety, not even survival.
Faint laughter.
Just each other. The storm outside would pass. Or it wouldn't. He would recover. Or he wouldn't. But tonight, she would stay awake beside him, watching his chest rise and fall. Because as long as he breathed, there was still something left. Still a reason to fight. still a candle burning beneath the ashes. Chapter 6. Until the end, the storm had not broken for days. The world outside the train car was still and endless, buried in white. No birds, no footsteps, no sky, only silence, only cold. Inside, the oil lamp sputtered. Its flame was small now, like him. She sat beside him as she always did, her back pressed against the rusted wall, his head resting in her lap, his breath growing slower, shallower. She no longer slept. Sleep was a luxury for those who had time, and time was thinning. His fever had come 2 nights ago. By now the wound had darkened. No more scavenged rags to change it, no more alcohol to cleanse, no more hope to bargain with. Still, he smiled. Even now, even here, he looked at her as if she was the only thing left that mattered. And maybe she was. His voice, when it came, was barely a thread, a sound made of breath and memory. "Do you remember the river?" he asked. She blinked. There was no river. He smiled wider, cracked lips, broken smile. "No, not here." Before. A pause. Then she remembered. A distant life. Or maybe just a dream, where water ran between stones, where sunlight dappled through trees, and he had held her hand like it was the only thing worth holding. A life before the fall, a life before the world forgot itself. "Yes," she whispered. "I remember." His fingers twitched against hers. He looked so fragile now, like ash held, together by will, I think, he said slowly. "If there's something after, if we get another chance," he coughed. Blood stained his teeth, but he kept going. "I'll find you. I swear it." She wanted to speak, to tell him not to, say goodbye, to lie and say he would get better, that there would be spring and warmth and green things again. But the lie stuck in her throat, so instead she said, "I'll wait." And that broke something inside him, because he knew she meant it. In this life or the next, she would wait. His breath hitched, eyes heavy, lips trembling. He reached up, slowly like the last motion he'd ever make, and touched her face. "Anywhere," he whispered. "Any world, any sky. I'll find you." Tears filled her eyes, but they did not fall. There were no tears left. Only ache. Only the sound of his breath. She pressed her forehead to his, their skin both cold, but together still warm. "You're not alone," she said. "Not while I'm here." Outside, snow swept across the world like a shroud. Time slowed, breath by breath. He closed his eyes. And then, just before the silence could take him, he spoke one last time. "Promise me, you'll live." She hesitated. That was the crueler vow, to live when the one she loved did not. But she nodded, because to refuse would be to waste the love he gave her. "I promise." His lips curled faintly, his last smile, then silence, but not emptiness, not to her. She held him long after his heart stopped, held him like he was still there, like his soul had simply slipped into the air around her, into the rusted walls, into the whispering wind. She didn't scream,
Come on, you
didn't
can
collapse. She just stayed. A girl in the ruins, with no God, no country, only memory, and a promise.
Faint laughter.
That was enough. When dawn came, the storm eased. She stepped out of the train car and stood beneath the skeletal bridge. The sun, faint and pale, barely broke the clouds.
I'm here.
But it was there, and in it she imagined him, his eyes, his touch, his vow echoing across time. If there's a next life. She looked at the sky, and for the first time in days she breathed, not for herself, but for him, for the part of him that lived on in her heartbeat, in her steps, in her promise. She would live, and one day, somewhere, somehow, she would see him again. Chapter 7. The Last Light. She lived on. Alone in the ruins, a solitary figure against the endless gray. The world around her was silent. No bird song, no footsteps, only the whisper of wind threading through broken walls and shattered dreams. Yet, within her a fragile flame burned, stubborn and unwavering, a candle held tightly in the darkest storm. Each day was a battle against the cold, the silence, the crushing weight of absence. But every morning she rose. She wrapped herself in his coat, the only warmth left from a time before the world fell apart, and stepped into the frozen wasteland. She carried with her a small battered journal, its pages worn and frayed, its spine cracked, but its heart still beating with ink and memory. In that journal she wrote of the man who had once shared her days and nights, whose breath had faded beside her in the train car beneath the rusted bridge. She wrote of rivers that no longer flowed, of skies that no longer held stars, of dreams that were stolen by fire and ash. But most of all, she wrote of love, a love that refused to be swallowed by silence, a love that lived in every word she traced, with trembling fingers. Her handwriting was uneven, stained with smudges of soot and tears, but each letter was a promise that their story was not lost, that it would not be forgotten. The days passed in a rhythm of solitude and memory. She scavenged what little the broken world left behind: rusted cans, cracked glass, faded photographs, and returned each night to the cold refuge of the train car. There, beneath the dim glow of the flickering oil lamp, she read aloud from her journal. Her voice was soft, barely more than a whisper, but it filled the empty space with warmth. Sometimes she imagined he was listening, his eyes bright and full of light, reaching for hers through the years and miles that death had stretched between them. She spoke to him in the silence, told him about the world as it was now, and about the flickers of hope that still stirred deep within her. One evening, as snow fell heavy outside, she found herself staring out the broken window. The gray horizon stretched endlessly, but just beyond the edge of the world she knew, a faint glow shimmered. A light, small and distant, but alive. For a moment she allowed herself to believe that perhaps somewhere, beyond the ash and ruin, there was a place where life could begin again, where love could bloom like wildflowers in spring. That night, she wrote her longest entry yet. Words poured from her heart like rivers long dammed. Words of sorrow and strength, of loss and longing, of a promise made beneath shattered stars. If anyone finds this, she wrote, know that once, in this broken world, love lived and breathed. It was not the fire that ended us, no, it was the silence after. But I will carry its flame, and I hope in some other time, some other place, it will burn again. Her voice cracked as she read the passage aloud, the echo of her own words filling the cold room like a prayer. Days turned into weeks. The seasons shifted, but the cold remained relentless and unyielding. Her body grew thinner, but her spirit remained unbroken. She became a keeper of memories, a guardian of stories in a world that had forgotten both. Sometimes when the wind moaned through the ruins, she thought she heard his voice calling her name, A faint whisper on the air, a promise carried on the breeze. And she answered, every time. I am here, she would say.
Come on, you can.
I am still here. Because to live was to remember. To remember was to love. And to love was to keep the last light burning. One cold dawn,
Faint laughter.
she stepped outside and looked toward the horizon. The sun rose slowly, its pale light barely piercing the heavy clouds. But it was enough. Enough to chase away the darkest shadows, if only for a moment. She closed her eyes and let the light wash over her face. Her heart ached, full of grief and hope intertwined. In that moment she understood. Her story was not over. It was only beginning. Because even in a world stripped bare, even when all seemed lost, there was still one truth that remained. Love, once kindled, never truly dies. It waits. It endures. And someday, somehow, it finds a way to rise again. Closing. Thoughts the candle she carried was small, fragile, but it was hers, and she would guard it fiercely through the endless storms, through the silence, through the night. For love is not the end. It is the light beneath the ashes.